with me on that. Okay. So welcome everyone. Thanks so much for coming out to Sturgis Library tonight for our talk on mystery and crime fiction. Tonight we've got Steph Cha, Rachel Howzell Hall, Dan Chaon, and Elizabeth Hand. They're all writers who write across these genres. Some write a little bit of both, some write in other genres, and it's going to be an awesome talk delving into the writing of mystery and crime fiction, the reading of it, discussions around it. And a big thank you goes out to all of our participants. Like, it's really kind of you to spend your nights with us, and we're really excited to hear what you have to say. And thank you to all our viewers for coming out to this. I'm Corey Farrenkopf. I'm the Assistant Director of Sturgis Library. For all of you viewing this online, not locally, Sturgis Library is Barnstable Village's library. We are the oldest building in America housing a library, and we're super haunted. So if that's your thing and you want to come check it out at some point when like COVID's less of a thing, I'll tell you all about the ghosts. So there's that. Like I said earlier, in the chat, you're going to find links to different places where you can purchase the author's books. It's always really important to support the arts. It's always really important to buy your favorite author's books, because like without doing that, then it's harder for them to write books. So if you feel so inclined, check those links out. That would be great. Yeah, and before we get going, I'm going to read the author's bios, and then we're going to get into the conversation. So bring that up real quickly. All right, so we got Steph Cha is the author of Your House Will Pay, winner of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and the California Book Award, and the Juniper Song Crime Trilogy. She's a critic whose work has appeared in the Los Angeles Times, USA Today, and Los Angeles Review of Books, where she served as the noir editor and is the current series editor of the Best American Mystery and Suspense anthology. A native to San Fernando Valley, she lives in Los Angeles with her family. Next, we got Elizabeth Hand. Elizabeth Hand is the best-selling author of 14 genre-spanning novels and 5 collections of short fiction and essays. Her work has received multiple Shirley Jackson World Fantasy and Nebula Awards, among other honors, and several of her books have been New York Times and Washington Post notable books. Rachel Howzell Hall is the author of the critically acclaimed novel, And Now She's Gone, and the Anthony Award, Lefty Award, and ITW Award nominated They All Fall Down. Writes the acclaimed Lou Norton series, including Land of Shadows, Skies of Ash, Trail of Echoes, and City of Saviors. Rachel is also the co-author of The Good Sister with James Patterson, which was included in the New York Times bestseller, The Family Lawyer. She is currently on the board of directors for the Southern California chapter of Mystery Writers of America and is a Pitch Wars mentor for 2020. She also lives in LA. Dan Chaon, his most recent book is Ill Will, a national bestseller that was named one of the best books of 2017 by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, NPR, Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, Kirkus Review, and Publishers Weekly. His other works include the short story collection Stay Awake, which was a finalist for the Story Prize, the national bestseller Await Your Reply, and Among the Missing, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. Chaon's fiction has appeared in Best American Short Stories, the Pushcart Prize Anthology, and the O. Henry Prize for Stories. He has been a finalist for the National Magazine Award in Fiction, the Shirley Jackson Award, and he is the recipient of an Academy Award in Literature for the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Chaon lives in Cleveland. So that's everything, and I'm admitting a couple people, and we're gonna get rolling. So the first question we have, being a librarian, I'm at the library, I'm the guy who orders like the fiction, and I have tons of people who are always like, what's the difference between mystery and thriller? What's the difference between suspense and mystery? How do you define those? What's the difference? So being writers who write in those genres, how would you differentiate between mystery and thriller and suspense and crime fiction? Do you find that delineating between the genres is a good thing, or do you find genre tags limiting? And yeah, what are your definitions of those things?
I'm looking at Steph, seeing that she's an editor of all those.
I know.
I have some thoughts on this. You know, I guess
See?
I don't really.
I mean, I think that genre tags are very useful just for letting people who like a certain flavor that like, here's where you can find that in like great numbers. You know, I think that as like pure categorizations, you know, they're really fictions in themselves. I mean, I think of them more as kind of like, you know, it's kind of like colors, right? Like where does green end and where does blue begin, right? You like something that's like somewhere along that gradient, and like, you know, sometimes something's a tinge of this and a tinge of that. And I mean, I think particularly when you get to the distinctions between like subgenres, like where does something stop being a mystery, where does something start being a thriller? Well, what how much suspense makes a suspense novel versus a regular novel, you know? And you know, and I'm always thinking about, you know, where does a novel become crime fiction rather than literary fiction, or like is there a large space where something can be both? You know, I feel like all of these kind of distinctions are like not quite arbitrary, because I think there is usefulness to them, but like they're looser than people like to pretend. You know, and I'm looking at writers on this panel who like dabble in different genres all the time, right? You know, I read a lot of stuff that's like that kind of straddles, you know, different like genres, like, you know, straddling horror and mystery, for example. That's like a very that's a part of like the horror spectrum that I particularly like, for example, you know. So I think it's just a matter of like it's a helpful way to kind of look for what you like. I think it's a poor way to exclude things that you think that you might not like.
Hey, Steph, since you're the editor of Best American Mystery Stories, is there something that you will say, I love this story, but I can't include it because it just doesn't count?
Yeah, I definitely have. Like, there are definitely stories that kind of straddle that line and where I've made that call. And I think like for that particular anthology, and you know, when I was editing the noir section of the LA Review of Books, I thought about this a lot. Like what comes under the umbrella and what really actually is just too much of a stretch to fit.
Yeah.
And I think that like if crime is a major feature of the story and one that kind of drives the story and the characters, then I kind of include it. If it's really at the periphery and it's just kind of there for like a little bit of detail, or it's like only in this like side part, then I don't necessarily consider it crime. You know, I got a couple submissions that I actually really liked that were suspenseful, but they didn't have that kind of crime element. And while I was like, I could probably make the argument for these stories, I also don't want to kind of there's a part of me that's like, I also want to give the people who are picking up this anthology like what they picked it up for, which is stories that do kind of center crime in enough of a way that like, you know, even if it is like some kind of smaller, more character driven piece, or something or something that like doesn't have a mystery in it, that's going to kind of satisfy something for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are definitely like several stories that kind of were on the line for me. And some of those I was like, all right, bring it in, I'm all about it. And some I was like, it's just a little bit too tenuous.
Yeah, I've been noticing that since crime, mystery, thriller has become, once again, very, very popular, everyone's starting to kind of market their books as that. And I will get one and I'll read it and I'm like, well, where's the body? Where's the assault? Where's the rape? Where are the things that make a crime novel? Where's the wrong against the other person? I'm not talking, you know, the wrong of life, the existential crisis of blah, 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 but where's the stuff? And I read it and I get upset because as a writer of it, you know, I know what beats you have to have. I know what you know, what plot twists and reveals and twists that you need to have to call this a mystery. I've done procedurals, which, you know, are different from the thriller suspense novels I've been writing, but they all have that thing in common where someone has been wronged, like grievously, and someone is trying to solve that. Someone is running, and there's a threat of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness with whatever's going on. And yeah, I'm kind of starting to cock an eyebrow at a lot of books that have thriller in them, and there are no thrills. There's no me, catching my breath or, doing this to see what's about to happen. They just have that one scene, like you're saying, Steph, that one scene around the edges to kind of say, yes, that's a thriller, but it's like, not really.
Yeah.
I feel like I have such a wiggly compass when it comes to that I think I might write those kinds of books that you would pick them up and read them and say, well, where's the body? Where's the this? Where's the that?
But there's loathing. There's that.
Yeah,
also not the books of yours that I've read.
Yeah,
well,
it's like there's this sense of dread. That's
and that's what I was going to ask. What's the common denominator? And I think what you just said. I think dread. I think that's a really
this visceral kind of, your gut just is not. You're not settled. And Shirley, I've read a lot of like Shirley Jackson stories, and they're not outwardly horror or anything like that, but you feel so uneasy reading them. You feel very uncomfortable, but you have to keep reading, because what is she going to do? Yeah.
I think the thing that's interesting about crime fiction for me, and like crime as this subject that we all kind of write about in various ways, is that it does push characters into interesting situations, and you get to see how people react under extreme circumstances, and you get to see how people treat each other in ways that are not ordinary. And I think that maybe what you're getting at, Rachel, is something that I have seen, which is like some books that are kind of literary novels that are marketed as thrillers and somehow give you both the worst of both worlds. Like they're neither they're not well written, but like they got published because they were able to push the thriller thing, but then they're also not well plotted, so like you can't ignore the writing. But I think that like that's the kind of immediate like, oh, this is going to give me something that you get with like that kind of core crime fiction, is that that people are going to be in these situations where like they're going to have to do something about like the crime that's driving the story.
Yeah. I mean, the genre categories as a writer, I personally don't really care about that much, but readers do. And so, when I come on stage and I'm like, hey, I'm a horror writer, and horror readers are like, no, not really. I mean, I think that's sort of what I do, but a lot of people who are in the horror genre are like, I don't think so, Dan. So I mean, I do think, it's like, you get those categories in Netflix where it's like, here's more dark psychological fiction, or whatever, and you expect it to be, it can't be Bridesmaids.
So let's hop to question number 2. So in the audience, we definitely have a bunch of readers, we have a bunch of writers. So this one's for the writers. What do you believe is the most important craft element or craft advice you can talk about or give to any upcoming crime or mystery writers?
I would say read a lot. Read across the genre, from cozies to even the dark stuff. Read and study how characters are built and how plot lines and twists and reveals are created. And then read outside your genre. I read a lot of nonfiction because a lot of great fiction comes out of the crazy things that happen in real life. And watch good TV, which helps you kind of understand how pacing should happen. So consume a lot of, I hate saying the word content, because what we do is more than content, but taking a lot of art.
Yeah, I agree completely. That's almost exactly what I would have said, Rachel. You're in my brain. But what Dan just said too, taking a lot of art, taking other arts as well, read widely, and certainly there's so much great stuff to stream now in film and TV, but it's hard to see a play now, but there are plays that you can stream. You know, last year the National Theater was streaming things. When museums open, go to museums, look at art online. All of that stuff touches different parts of our brains, you know, and inspires us and kind of pushes us, I think, outside of our comfort zone. I think it's important to read things that are not necessarily to our quote unquote taste. And I think it's important to do that with other arts as well.
I have a practical craft tip that I'm going to share just because I've read a lot of beginning work and it seems to be a commonality. I think it's helpful when you're starting to write a book, if any of you are interested in doing that, to think in scenes and to like really focus on the scene work. Because if you start thinking about like everything that you want to put in a novel, you're going to write a 10-page synopsis that can't get anyone interested because there's no point of entry. So if you're getting started, like instead of trying to like figure everything out at once, like put yourself in a scene and kind of like get on the ground level, look around, stay in your character's head. And I actually think that having the right level of zoom on a scene or chapter or whatever is something that a lot of beginning writers are not able to get right the first time. And I think it's a very easy adjustment.
Yep.
and also when you're out at, you know, out and about, when we finally, well, we're actually out and about, even in the small ways. As a writer, you're looking at people wherever you are. I would say eavesdrop a lot. If there's something incredible that's happening, write it down, sneak a note or whatever. Even if there's something not terribly incredible happening, but there's some dynamics at play where you can sense there's some subtext and conversations that you're eavesdropping on, write that down, because that goes into the scene work of making each scene like remarkable. Just your people watching and infusing your make-believe world with what you've seen in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, your work and Steph's work and Liz's work are all super rich in a sense of setting and a sense of the world of the story. And I feel like they're like beginning writers often miss that, or they often miss what's interesting about, you know, their own space that they grew up in or that they know well. And I feel like that's a thing to encourage in young writers is to find what's unique and what's going to really drive the visual aspect of in the reader's mind.
Yeah, I think a sense of place is so important for books, you know, for any kind of storytelling. I mean, you know, you hear a lot about plotting and character, which are, you know, of course are important, but a sense of place and anywhere you have lived, anybody here, you know, or anybody in the world, you know, everybody has lived someplace special. Everybody has a connection, whether it's a positive one or a negative one, a powerful connection to place. And that's what I love to see in work, in student work and published work. You know, take me to some place that I haven't been before. That even if it's a place I have been before, take me to the place that you know, the part of it that you know that I do not, because you know that and I don't know it.
Yeah, because what's cool is place also dictates how people act. For instance, you know, everyone thinks they know LA. You have no idea how interesting and broad and strange LA is. But there is something that's true. When it's time for fire season, we all act a certain way. We go out and we see our cars and there's, you know, ashes all over them. We, you know, everyone's putting eye drops in their eyes, and allergies and asthma is just all out. And that affects everything that you do. You don't sit outside. You don't do this. You don't do that. So when you're looking at a place, think about those things that are so unique to you, like California in our fire season, that your characters are agitated because of that special thing that happens in your part of the world that I would never know about. People can easily Google, you know, what is life like in Los Angeles? But they won't know that, you know, most of us have eye drops in our medicine cabinet for fire season, right, Steph? Or you don't wash your car because it's fire season. Why do that?
Those were all things I didn't know. I didn't, because I mean, where I'm over here in Cape Cod, and Liz can probably be on the same thing, where I see all the stuff about the fires going on, and I don't think about like what it's like to have a snow of ash raining down on me. Like that's,
Yeah.
ooh, that's
Yeah,
dark.
those fabulous sunsets happen for a reason. It's because of all the irritants and pollutants in the air. And so we're all kind of breathing that and taking pictures of that gorgeous sunset. So yeah.
So question number 3 is, so when you're writing crime and mystery fiction, what sort of research into the legal world do you have to do, and research into like the law enforcement side of things in order to portray your plots and your characters and like the logic of your story accurately? So what sort of research do you do to like get it right?
I would say fortunately, and this is a great thing about our genre, we're all so very supportive of each other, and we have a lot of experts in our genre. So a lot of cops, a lot of PIs, FBI agents, and I know I turn to them for information that I can't find online that's, you know, easy to find. I will ask questions, email, read their books, both fiction and nonfiction, and, you know, just continue being the nosy writer that I am. And that's probably the best, because they can give you the most up-to-date information about, you know, procedure. They don't do chalk lining on for bodies, and it's like, oh, that's good to know, because I don't want to appear, you know, like I don't know anything.
Man, you know, the one thing that I always get like dinged for in Amazon reviews is gun people are
Oh God, they're the worst people.
incredibly, aren't they? Like they're just so
the worst
nitpicky.
people. Yeah.
And so I've really tried to like make as many you know, like knowledgeable gun people friends as I can, so that I can at least get one gun right.
That's funny.
I don't write any kind of procedurals. I've written about half a dozen books that would fall under, you know, the big rubric we've been discussing, but they're all amateur sleuth protagonists, so they kind of stumble along, and that works for me because I can kind of stumble along with them. And I do a lot of research. I do a ton of research, but it's never into law enforcement stuff, unless there's obviously a point that comes up in the book where I have to get something right, some issue of law or procedure, but it tends to be minor. But yeah, stuff like the guns, stuff like forensics, you know, looking at a body and trying to figure out, you know, what kind of a wound somebody would die from or survive from, stuff like that. I tend to research either from, you know, books, or I have some textbooks, or from people I know who work in, you know, the medical field. But yeah, the gun stuff, it's like car stuff. You also don't want to get classic car things wrong.
Oh God.
I've been called on that too.
Liz, what did you do with Curious Toys? How did you get all that? I mean, was that just research reading, or did you do anything special? I mean, that's a book that takes place in what, 1870s, 1880s Chicago?
Well, it's actually a little later. It was 1915 Chicago, but
Okay.
but it actually, a lot of the era feels similar to earlier late 19th century. Yeah, I did do a lot of research, and actually I forgot, I did do some research with that into how the Chicago police force operated
Yeah,
at the
because that's
time.
what I was thinking about.
I completely forgot about that. So I did do that. I did do my homework. Yeah, that was one of those things. I just did a kind of a deep dive into Google, but also reading a lot of primary text documents,
That's what it feels like.
newspapers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It feels like you had some access to like real life stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's, you can get a subscription to, I don't know, newspapers.com or something. I forget. These online archives that go back, over 100
New York Times
years.
has the Wayback Machine or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I'm not a natural researcher. I don't do research for its own sake. I'm very lazy about stuff like that. So I end up writing about subjects that I'm interested in, which means that the research component is interesting to me, so my last book dealt with early 90s Los Angeles, and so I had to do a lot of research for that. But a lot of that was just talking to people who had interesting things to say. And I did read, I read a couple big books on the LAPD, and I read a book about Black Los Angeles. That was kind of a history, but that ended unfortunately in the 90s. But I did a lot of book research, but it was all kind of stuff that I would have wanted to read about anyway, or just kind of spot research. And I don't really have point of view characters. I haven't yet who are specialists. I have a PI character who starts as an amateur sleuth, and I have these two people in my last book who are kind of just civilians. And so I didn't have to become an expert on any of these kind of things that were in the background. And when I needed something to kind of just read smoothly without mistakes, I would talk to somebody who knew more about it than I did. Like sometimes lawyer friends. I am a lawyer, but I'm not an experienced lawyer. And anytime I need kind of legal research in my book, I go to somebody else or I look it up. Or I have a doctor friend who kind of walked me through some of the medical stuff that I had to deal with for my last book. But yeah, it's all kind of as needed for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And fortunately with mystery and crime, we have, if you're a writer, we have lots of conferences that will bring experts in, and you'll learn from them from panels, from California Crime Writers Conference to Left Coast Crime to BoucherCon to Writers Police Academy, actually, which is now in Green Bay. I went to a Writers Police Academy back in 2012, and it was actually at a police academy in North Carolina. And you're there with cops and fire folks and all these experts learning about what they do. And it was a great investment just to be surrounded by that for a few days. So this genre and the writers, we don't let, you won't feel alone or confused about where to go to get great information. And for resources for that kind of thing, please go to Sisters in Crime or Mystery Writers of America. They're great resources for research in person and online.
We're going to move on to number 4. First, I want to say I'm also very excited that half of you said that you just research as you go, because I'm also a writer and I have a very hard time sitting down and be I'm doing this for research. It's very special, very specifically, this is what I'm doing. It is rough for me. So question number 4, what sort of changes have you seen in the mystery crime genre over the past 10 years? And where do you either see it going in the future, or where do you hope it goes in the future?
Well, the genre has always been engaged in contemporary issues and in thinking about and problematizing questions of how society works. But I do feel like it's become more of a, you know, it's become something that's really important in the genre. And, you know, I think Steph's recent book is an example of that. Rachel's recent book is an example of that, where, you know, I mean, it's not just a, you know, Hercule Poirot coming in. I mean, there's like real stuff that matters to you know, every people's contemporary existence that's being dealt with in these books. And I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I love exactly what you're saying. And part of that is it's becoming more diverse and inclusive. Just Steph and I, of course, but there are a whole list of crime writers of color that are moving into the genre. There's still not enough, but it's more than 10 years ago. And that's
More
exciting
than
because
5 years
now,
ago.
yeah, more than hell, 3. But that it's exciting because now it's representing, you know, all parts of the country, all walks of life, all types of experiences. The genre itself, one reason it's so popular is because crime and mystery touches everyone in some ways. If not you directly, then someone you love. And now we're getting to see how different people deal with things like cops. You know, it's not this one-off now of our conversation about policing in America. It's now, you know, being talked about in crime, and where crime goes, everyone else follows, because crime, you know, that's why we have like 6,000 you know, CSIs and SVUs and all the rest of it, because it helps us understand who we are as a society. It helps us figure out what needs to happen and gives us peeks into the life of all kinds of people. So yeah, it's because we're opening it up, the genre is, you know, it's becoming really rich and really influential, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I remember around 10 years ago was when I first sold Follow Her Home. And I think that, and I remember talking to my agent and editor about, you know, like noir was not doing well in 2011.
No.
That was a time when like noir was not something that anybody was particularly interested in. I think at the time, like the Scandi noir was very popular, you know, but it's like this other country, all white people. Like I feel like it was just kind of a different vibe, more like serial killer kind of stuff, you know, like dark but also escapist. And then I feel like I also did not know. I mean, this is partially my fault because I was just not as exposed to the genre, but like I didn't know as many women crime writers. But then by the time my first book came out in 2013, Gone Girl had happened. And it's really hard to understate how much Gone Girl, like that one book, has changed the genre. And I don't think Gone Girl is the one that I would necessarily credit with like increases in inclusivity or anything like that. But like I do think it has made the genre, you know, kind of female friendly to the point where we now have male writers writing under female pseudonyms, you know. And so I think that's been a very interesting shift. I think the racial inclusivity is kind of on a different axis, and I feel like that has kind of gotten much better in the last few years. I have noticed just because I've been going to these conferences since 2013, 2014, and I feel like it used to be that like Rachel and I would be like two like the only people who are, you know, writers of color in a room, you know. I feel like that used to happen all the time, and now it doesn't happen anymore. I feel like the crowd is younger and more diverse, and I think that's really cool. I also understand that like in the 90s there was like kind of a boom time for like Black crime writers that obviously like kind of went away for a while, you know. So part of me wonders how much of this is cyclical, how much of this we can rely on going forward. But I mean, I really do appreciate the direction that the genre has been trending in over the last few years.
Yeah, it's to jump off what you were just saying, it to me it feels so much less escapist. The novels that I can remember, you know, my mother reading when I was growing up and that were in the library. I was not a huge crime reader per se, but I would pick up whatever was lying around the house. And it seemed very much escapist fiction and very formulaic. And that seems to have really kind of been swept away in the last decade. I think a lot of it is just because it had, the genres have become so much more inclusive, and they are, gradually becoming more diverse and also more international. And so the old formulas don't work anymore. There's new ones. There's new ways of telling stories. I mean, Dan, your work kind of, busts out of all these modes that were sort of that I grew up reading with horror or sort of edgy. I don't know how you would even describe it. A book like Ill Will, how would you explain that? I mean, how, what is the formula there? So I think that's been a big shift too. And I think that's been in part because there's so many new writers and younger writers. I'm old enough now that everybody's a younger writer, but that's what excites me. No, it's true. I get so excited now because I look at, there's all these debut writers, there's all these emerging writers coming out, and their voices and their stories are so beyond anything that I, can imagine writing. So that to me is really exciting.
Yeah. No, I think readers want something more. I think there are so many readers who are like, oh, if I have to read another, where she solves the crime and everybody goes about their lives. I think we've seen so many bad things happening that we kind of now demand that real life gets folded into what we're reading, right? I think, with people knowing what forensics is and DNA is, and the difference between a Glock and a Beretta, readers are more savvy and knowledgeable now more than ever, and so they want that in their books too. Thank God.
So jumping off that, this kind of segues really well into the next question about tropes. I guess this is kind of like narrowing our lens a little more. Are there any in the world of mystery crime tropes, like, do you feel that there are any tropes that have been I'm going to give a vague definition of trope off the top of my head, just in case any readers or viewers don't know what that is. But like a trope is a reoccurring image or a reoccurring like plot point or a reoccurring type of character that you see frequently spread across a genre, to the point where like someone can identify it, like the end of Scooby-Doo, where it's all of a sudden, oh, it's not actually a ghost, it's a guy in a mask. Like that is a trope. So in crime and mystery, what do you see any tropes that are like overdone? And do you see any tropes that you think are not utilized enough? Like what kind of like trope, do you want more Scooby-Doo out there or less Scooby-Doo? I don't know.
I'm done with the drunk heroine who blacks out and forgets everything and there's a body there. I am so done with that. I don't think we do that as much in American fiction as the Brits do with their drunk girls drinking gin out of water bottles or anything, but I want someone who willingly does the thing and pretends that I have no idea what you're talking about. I didn't do that. But not because she's drunk or passed out on pills, but because she's just a sociopath. I mean, I think that's more of an American way of dealing with that. It's like head on, she crazy, that kind of thing. This is all vodka right here, and I'm tired of that trouble.
I think, and this has been something that has really come up this last year. It's been it's not like it was invented this year, but I feel like it's really time to start problematizing policing as it's done in this country, and to start, I think, Rachel, you said something about this earlier, but I think, like just sort of presenting, like here's the good guys and they're the cops, and here's the bad guys and they're, and I think we just have seen over and over that that's not the way it really is. And I think literature and film need to reflect that a little more than they have. I mean, I grew up just, you know, watching cop shows unquestioningly, like, yeah, they're there to help everybody and catch the bad guys. And I don't know whether we need to start maybe problematizing that a little more.
Yeah.
I think part of what appeals to people about genre fiction is the like existence of tropes to an extent. You know, I think there's like a level of like, I know what I'm getting. And I think one of the fun things about writing within a genre is using those tropes and playing with those tropes and subverting those tropes. And I think that authors who I find interesting tend to do all those things at the same time, you know, and it's just kind of like cooking, right? You use some of this and you use some of that, you know, you're not going to get that creative with the flour, but like, you know, you might, I don't know how to cook.
But you put salt and
you know,
season
you know,
salt and stuff in the flour.
you
Yeah.
use your hand and you use your judgment. And, you know, so I feel like any one trope can be done well, you know. I think that I think that certainly with policing, I mean, certainly with policing, but I think like just whenever authors approach a trope like unthinkingly, you can kind of tell. And so I think that's what I like to see more than like retiring any one trope or like bringing one trope into the foreground, is just thoughtful engagement. You know, kind of more authors saying like, hey, like you're a sophisticated reader of this genre, so am I. Like I'm going to like show you what I think of this, and I always find that interesting. You know, even if it's a flavor that I've seen before.
I kind of find, and I'm guilty of doing this, but just the run that we've had of damaged protagonists, you know, people who are who are self-destructive, who are drug addicts, who are, you know, who are haunted, everybody, and I get it, everybody is damaged, everybody is haunted, but there's so many of these protagonists now in books that it's kind of, it itself has become a trope, and almost a cliche. You know, I kind of want to pick up a book and find a character who is a murderer, even, maybe especially a murderer, but somebody who's just kind of well-adjusted and sort of boring, and whatever they're doing to kind of come in and do their job, because the people who I know who are victims of crimes or who are doing police work or things like that, they are not all tormented, damaged people, you know? I mean, a lot of them are, but not all of them are. And so I kind of feel like it's almost like giving characters a pass in a novel. And obviously we want to see people, you know, act in extreme ways because that makes it interesting. But there is a challenge involved in writing characters who are, you know, good, although they are not milquetoast, but people who have who may not be quite so conflicted. I don't know, maybe that's just me. Maybe I've just written and read too many stories like that.
I see what you're saying. I'm thinking writing characters who are damaged, who have no idea that they're damaged. I mean, we're all damaged and we all go about life thinking that we're completely normal people, but there's something and there's someone who can't stand you. I mean, that happened to me once, where out of the blue, I got this hate letter from my cousin of all these things she cataloged about how I'd hurt her. And I'm like, what is she talking about? Oh, that thing? That wasn't about you. You know, but you go about life thinking I've offended no one. And there's someone over there who's like looking at you and absolutely hate you because you are to them, you are damaged and you are no good. And they want everything bad to happen to you. And I'm interested in that part where, yeah, you think you're great, you're not so great. And peeling away those layers of why someone would have a problem with you, Steph. Someone has a problem with you, Steph. And it's like, what? Steph has beautiful basset hounds, but I know her and I want to get her back. You know, that's interesting to me. And it's not because she's a drunk or anything. It's just because, I don't know, I found that one thing that just kills me about her, you know? That's interesting. And that's art.
Yeah,
That's my dog.
I mean, I think what you're getting at, Rachel, is just like kind of the fact that like anyone that we write about and want to like invest our time in is going to be kind of textured and is going to have like a personality, and like people are going to react to them like either positively or negatively. I do get what Liz is saying though about, something. I was actually just trawling through my Goodreads trying to figure out what book this was, but I feel like there's a book that I read recently where I was just like, I love this because it shows female competence, and I feel like that's something that is like in low supply in the genre, just like a competent woman who like gets things done, because I do think we have a lot of male examples. I will say I do love a damaged heroine. However, my favorites are probably probably written by two of you, and Sarah Grant has one that's like so good. But actually, most people cannot do somebody who is doing drugs every 4 hours and make it interesting. But Lizanne can.
Yeah.
So jumping off that one, we're going to do a couple of quick ones, and then we'll get to the Q&A for everyone, because the audience loves Q&A, and that's what we're here for. So this is my favorite question to ask. You now possess a time machine. You go back in time to tell your writer self one thing. What is that one thing you tell your young writer self?
Keep your day job. I still work a day job, and although it can be hard and exhausting, for me, I have lots of other things to worry about. I don't want to have to worry about bills and money and things like that. And so having that taken care of with a day job frees me creatively to kind of write about things that may or may not sell, but oh well, I have a check coming every other week. And when I was a young writer, I thought, I'm going to make $1 kajillion, and I'm going to, have all this big, great life and all this time to write because I just made $1 kajillion. And, it's only for 1%, but the money that I do make, I get to take care of my family, and I get to buy, good cheese sometimes. So I tell her, it's okay. You don't have to do this full time. Do something in the daytime that you love, and I do, and enjoy the process of creating because you can, not because you need to eat.
I guess I would tell myself to stop worrying about what the cool kids are doing and what the cool kids are getting, because I spent a lot of my 20s worrying about that, and it was a huge waste of time.
Oh.
But now you're with all the cool kids, and where are they
now?
I think I would say I would insist to my younger self that I keep a journal, not because I think that I've done anything interesting, because that was why I never could and why I never can keep a journal, because I, don't really on a day-to-day basis do anything very interesting. But what I find now is I just can't remember things, and just like quotidian little tiny details of things. There've been I have so many journals that I've bought over the years that I write maybe 5 or 10 pages in them, maybe more. I'm not kidding. I must have like a huge stack of them, and they go back 50 years. And I'll go and I'll pick up one of them and I'll read a page, and I'm like, oh my God, I remember that. I remember what that was like. I remember that experience. And a lot of this is material that I can make use of in writing. And I think, God, if I kept all of that, that would have been like an archive. Instead of having to pay for the subscription for newspaper.com, I could have gone to find those books from whatever year and opened them up and found a lot of the details that would have been useful to me in writing. But I never did it, and I still don't do it.
I have a Yelp account, and so and that serves as a journal kind of, but yeah.
Steph is a prolific Yelper.
I guess what I would tell my younger self, particularly like the very young self who grew up not knowing any writers, but I guess it applies even now, is writing is not magic, it's work. It is can't afford to just like wait for the muse to strike and like give you a novel. You have to sit down and write the novel. But the bright side of that is like you can really just do it. It's not, you don't have to be anointed.
Yeah. And don't worry about the whole Granta under 30 type list, those kind of things, because
I turned 35. I turned 35 this year, and I was like, oh, I'm ineligible for all of this for the rest of my life.
But you were a young lion.
I was nominated. That's true, and it was right under the wire.
But some of the best stories come from people who've actually lived, who have actually met enough people to know what a personality is and what subtext is, and drama where you don't think there's any drama because you've lived it. And so don't worry about the age thing. It's all good.
And that brings us to our final question of the night, which I'm just going to combine two questions for the sake of getting to the Q&A for everyone. Could everyone recommend one up-and-coming writer they're excited about who works in this genre? And what do you have coming out that we're going to get excited about? If you can tell us. If you can't tell us, just give us like a very vague mystery, and then we'll just move from there.
God, I had somebody and I totally forgot.
Well, I'm excited about a writer who's been around for a little while, but whose work I love, Kara Hoffman, who has a collection of short stories coming out in a few months from PM Press. And she is an amazing writer. She's kind of a transgressive writer. Her first novel was called So Much Pretty, and it blew me away. And her second novel was about a woman, an Iraqi war vet, female Iraqi war vet, returning home to the US. Her third novel was about a group of expats from different countries living in Greece. And I'm just so excited. And she also writes these adorable children's books, but she's younger, and she's deserves to be much more well-known. So I hope her short story collection will be kind of an entry point for new readers. Oh, and I'm working on I'm finishing a novel called Under the Big Black Sun, which is sort of a psychological thriller with some supernatural overtones, which is set in Hawaii. It's my first novel set in a warm, sunny, happy place instead of a grim, depressing, dark, cold place.
Cool.
I just read this book. It's called The Book of, it's probably backwards, but the Book of Otto and Liam by a guy named Paul Greiner, who I don't he's not young, but it's in some ways inspired by the Sandy Hook massacre. It's about a guy whose child is severely injured in a school shooting, and he becomes the target of a group of conspiracy theorists who believe that he's a crisis actor, and that all of this tragedy that happened to him was faked. And these people become increasingly aggressive, and it's really disturbing and scary and sad, and feels very timely.
And what are you working on now?
I just finished a novel that's like I think it's my first comic novel, but I'm not sure that it's funny to anybody except me. And it's about human trafficking. So.
Oh, a light subject.
There we go.
Yeah.
A romp.
A romp, yes.
I would recommend, if you haven't picked her up, she has 2 books out right now. Kelly Garrett, Kellye, Garrett, and her series is about an amateur sleuth who is trying to make some money, and so she looks to solve a crime. Hollywood Homicide and Hollywood, I can't remember the other one, but they're LA-based stories.
Hollywood Ending.
Ending, thank you. And she's working on something new that it's about sisterhood. It's a New York story. Yeah, it's a New York story, and it's about a young reality starlet who's found dead in like is it a playground stuff? It's somewhere in New York, and
I haven't read it yet.
And so she has to find a killer. But Kelly's smart. She's a Black writer. She's a great advocate for all of us. And I'm looking forward to seeing what she's going to do with this new book that's coming out. My next story is called These Toxic Things, and it's coming out in September. And it's the story of a digital curator. Her name is Mickey, and she curates memories of her customers in these little boxes they call memory banks, which are like basically Alexa devices. And she's curating the trinkets of this curio store owner, and the curio store owner ends up dead. And so the items that Mickey's curating for her may help uncover why the owner died. So that comes out in September.
What's that called?
These Toxic Things.
Rachel, you're putting me to shame. I feel like you've had like 3 books come out in the last like 2 years. What's going on?
I know, I'm working, always working. I have to get it out, Steph. You know me.
And you have a day job. Oh my God. I'll start with what I'm working on, which is nothing. I haven't.
You're working on raising a baby. You just
Yeah,
had.
I mean, so I haven't, I actually really want to get back into writing a novel again. It's been a couple of years because I finished edits on Your House Will Pay in like first half of 2019. Then I went into a writer's room, and then like I decided to take a little breather, and then the pandemic hit, and then I had my baby, who is almost a year old now. And so somehow it's just like all gotten away from me.
And now you're an editor for.
Yeah, and I guess like the project I have coming out is Best American Mystery and Suspense, which it will be out in October, and that's kind of what I've been working on for the last year. And that's been super rewarding, and there's so much great talent in there. Actually, one writer I will highlight, one of my favorite stories in the collection is by Faye Snowden. Rachel, do you know Faye?
I know
She's,
Faye.
she's incredible. I've only met her once, but she wrote this like incredible like historical short story about like the like first Black woman who's trying to vote in this like southern town, and the like incredible amount of resistance to it. And like there's a part where she hides her son-in-law in like a small part of the house while like all the white neighbors like come and like search the place. I mean, it's so good that I feel like I've seen the movie. Like, and I actually like I messaged her and I was like, you should write this book. Like this would like do numbers. Like this is so good. Yeah. Anyway, you can find the story in Best American, and now I'm just automatically interested in anything else she writes.
Awesome. So we've reached the end of our planned question section. Now we'll do a quick like 15-20 minutes of Q&A from the audience. So everyone in the audience, the way this works is if you go into the chat, you send me a question, I will ask it. Before we do that, I'm putting in the book buying links one more time. So if you want to check out some of our authors, a great selection of books, check out those links, support the writers, and start sending me your questions, please. Gotta be polite. Yeah, if you guys want to do like a barbershop quartet while we're waiting, that would be great. We'll get this going viral at the end.
Yes. And while we're waiting, I'll say one thing that we haven't touched on yet about the pandemic. And, I've been asked, Will you write about the pandemic? Yes, I will. Especially since, and there was a news article last week that said exactly what I always thought. Right now, with people being trapped in the house with each other, there are a lot of bad things happening to people.
Yeah.
And, from domestic abuse to child abuse to depression, anxiety, all of it. And as a crime writer, that's what I do. And it may not be a COVID-19 novel. COVID-19 will play a part in what makes a character do what they do or how they find themselves in this situation. So, yeah, I understand why some writers wouldn't want to write about it, but I've never been that writer. So you guys, are you
It
gonna?
seems like it'd be a really good time to be a serial killer because you just get to wear a mask all the time.
Yeah.
This actually
Wow.
happened though. This actually happened. There's
It
a
did?
case where this woman died in her home, and it looked like she couldn't breathe. And this is how she died. She couldn't breathe. And her husband's like, she just stopped breathing. She had COVID-19. And they did an autopsy. She didn't have COVID-19. He smothered her and had hoped that
Oh,
the COVID-19,
Um,
they would have just kind of written it off. And it's like,
yeah.
see, a lot of people are doing that kind of thing or
Mhm.
stealing people's checks. And yeah, it's crazy.
Well,
People are crazy.
the book I'm working on was inspired when I was last year. My daughter was expecting her first child, and I went to stay with her on one of the Hawaiian Islands, and I ended up being there for 6 weeks and had to go through. Well, and this is the thing. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is oh my God, such a wonderful thing," which it was a wonderful thing. It was great to be with her, but it was also very direct, it was very disorienting, and it was very, I had planned to go there to help her out as a mom, but then there being in quarantine for 2 weeks with all the craziness that induces, and then getting out of quarantine and being there for another month and seeing this island that was totally dependent on the tourist industry, and that's all gone, and all of a sudden all of the fault lines are exposed in this very small place.
In
and
paradise,
so
right?
all of the and all of the tension, all of the racial tensions, the tensions between the haves and the have-nots, between the very large homeless population there, all of these things that get glossed over by the tourist industry, which is trying to sweep it under the rug so you don't ever see it. And then all of a sudden, a place where every day 3,500 tourists are arriving, and it goes from that to 34 people arriving a day. And that's including the flight crews on the aircraft. So it was a very weird, very surreal experience, and very, anyway. But it took a while. I'm still processing it, but it was kind of what you were saying, Dan, about everybody's wearing a mask. All of a sudden, all of these, anybody could be a killer in this place.
Yeah.
And it's a perfect locked room situation because you can't leave.
Yeah.
You can't even get there, and when you get there, you can't leave.
Preach.
So we've got a bunch of questions coming in, and to everyone who's asking questions, I don't know if we'll get to all of them just for time constraints, but we're going to start off with this one from Sarah Pinsker, who is also an amazing writer. If you haven't read A Song for a New Day, it is amazing. It's so good, and it's crazy that it came out right before this pandemic, because is it timely? So Sarah asks, in science fiction and fantasy, we talk a lot about plotters versus pantsers. Do crime and mystery novels definitionally, oh my God, definitionally involve being, I'm doing this wrong. Do crime and mystery novels,
Do we plot?
do you need to be plotting, or can you be a pantser? Sorry,
I
Sarah,
plot.
for butchering that.
Yeah, I plot because I like control. Also because I'm a day jobber. I only get like an hour or so to write Monday through Friday. And so I like being able to cross things off. I'm that person who keeps a list of things to do, an organizer, and if it's not on the organizer, I will write it down so I can cross it off. That's me. So yes, I am a big plotter. I do allow myself to go off the grid if inspiration strikes, and I feel safe doing that because I know I have the outline. So yeah.
I kind of was a pantser, I guess, for the first 3 books, which were PI novels. And so they kind of had that like traditional mystery spine that I could rely on. And I felt like that gave me enough built-in structure that I felt like I was never in danger of like not having a book that held together at the end. With my last book, I had to plot a lot more. And I found to my surprise that it's a lot harder to plot a novel that doesn't follow a traditional mystery structure than one that does. So I feel like the hard plot elements are not like the twisty things and the details. I feel like those are all like more cosmetic. It's more kind of getting that underlying structure down. And I think depending on what my next project is, I will probably do a lot more of that structuring on the front end, because I found that I avoided that because I had been in the habit of not plotting, and I ended up writing a bunch of stuff that I trashed, and once I kind of sat myself down and was like, okay, instead of like writing whatever we feel like this session, like we're gonna like try to like lay out what happens. That helped me write a lot more freely and easily, actually.
I'm a pantser, and it's the only way I know how to work. I'm addicted to the joy of discovering something and being surprised by what comes out. But at the same time, if you've read my books, you can tell.
That's me too. If you've read my books, you can tell. Plot is not. I wish I could plot, but I sort of, I learned by going where I have to go. I just sort of stumble along, or when, I think it was Steph, you said earlier something about for writers to just focus on a scene, to new writers. And that's what I do. I just kind of go build it scene by scene. It's like brick by brick. But I wish I could plot. I envy you who can plot. I really do. I wish I could get the plot implant.
In a few years with technology, you will be able to get that plot.
You will.
I know
God,
too.
the terror. That kind of stuff freaks me out. We got a question from Paula. This is for Rachel and anyone else who's co-written a book. How do you work when you co-write a book with anyone or with James Patterson? How does that go?
Well, that was, hi, Paula. Hi, sorority sister. It was an incredible experience writing with James Patterson. And it was weird because it's the book was approximately 30,000 words. And so we'd work together every 10,000 words. I would outline, he likes outlines. I would outline the first 10,000 words, what the story is. And he'd write it, he'd look at it and say, that's too much, change that, move that here, move that there. And so I do that. And then the next 10,000, and then the next 10,000. He is an incredible editor. And I work with his editor as well. And my biggest problem as a novelist is the big sprawl of a book is my books are 80 to 90,000 words, and pared down, it's like, well, what happens to all the stuff over there that I like doing? And so I learned from him how to get in and out of scenes, how to make the page turn, how to do cliffhangers at the end of every single chapter. And it was very collaborative, but he was definitely a teacher for me because, he's James Patterson, and no matter what you think about, his stories, he knows what he's doing. He's James Patterson for a reason. So while it was collaborative and back and forth, it was definitely, student and teacher. And I've learned how to do that for my, They All Fall Down and Now She's Gone. So yeah, it was awesome.
We can jump to, did anyone else have a co-writing experience you want to talk about? If not, we can jump to the next one. Jump into the next one. Coming from Pam. Is there a subgenre that is easier to break into? Very industry forward.
Wow, I don't know. Steph, you're reading a lot of stuff these days.
Yeah.
I mean, do you know?
I don't know, because I don't know how the places that submit to me solicit or judge the things that they accept. So I don't know that there's any one soft entry point into the genre. I do think that just more, I think rather than thinking about like area of the genre, it might be more useful to kind of think about what you're interested in reading and writing and kind of starting to go, once we're able to go congregate again, going to these conventions and talking to people who are like-minded and who are doing things that you find interesting, and kind of hear how they came up, or see what they're doing. I feel like this is a genre where, like, look, like, a couple of people are famous, but for the most part, even the famous people are not famous. So I feel like everyone is just like happy to like help out and talk to you, and I think there are just like so many of us who are just like, who have been there and who are still there and are just trying to kind of make it work. And I think like following your interest and finding your community is probably more important than thinking about like what parts are like easier to break into, because I think it's all kind of murky,
Yeah.
I think one thing to add on my own part of this, for being like a librarian in addition to being a writer, is one thing that I've been told a lot is try to not write towards trends, because usually the trends were written like 2 years ago, and the thing you'll be getting published at that point will already have moved beyond it. And so like as I'm doing my book purchases for figuring out a genre, say I'm trying to think of one that's been coming out recently. There's a bunch of cult books coming out right now. I love cult books. But you can only buy so many cult books for the library collection, right? So you're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 like the big name cult books for that season, and then the number 4, 5, 6, and 7 might not get as much traction, whether it's what your book is on or the writer who did it. Like if you're Stephen King writing the next one, like everyone's going to buy the book, but if you're someone new, there's an issue there. So I've always been told to like write what you enjoy, like write what you like, but the trend thing has stuck with me. The next one we have from another viewer. This is a great question. Have you ever revealed a secret or something you didn't want anyone else to know in a novel because you really wanted to tell someone but couldn't in real life? Can you tell us it now?
No, I would say, yeah, there are thousands of secrets in my books, because a lot of the stuff in my life, or in my life, they bother me or they scare me, or I mean, that's one reason why I'm writing. It's like therapy for me. I'm a cancer survivor, and every time I go to a doctor, I hold my breath, because it's happened to me. And so the way I work a lot of that stuff out is through writing. All the family weirdness, I write about it. I kept diaries as a kid from 3rd grade all the way up until like my 2nd year out of college. And I read those pages and it's like, oh my God, this stuff is crazy. And how am I dealing with it? Well, I'm dealing with it by writing. That's how many of us word nerds deal with big issues. So yeah, my books are filled with secrets I've wanted to say but couldn't. So I create people to talk to me.
That's like an FBI agent question. Like, what is this? Who's listening in? I have not done anything that I would like to confess for the first time here.
But would you say though that you infuse like the mother-daughter scenes in Your House Will Pay? I'm sure you've infused some relationship.
Yeah, definitely. A lot a lot of what I write about kind of borrows from, real life, especially family dynamics, but then puts them through like that kind of funhouse mirror. Like I have a very good relationship with my mother, and I borrowed the good parts of that for this really strenuous relationship, and just kind of mutating like general second generation anxieties into characters in this like more extreme situation. I mean, I do stuff like that all the time. But I don't think I haven't like perversely confessed to any crimes.
No.
If I ever commit a crime that I can't tell anyone, I will for sure write about it and disguise it as fiction and promise that.
My sister once said a really mean thing to me after she read my last book. She was like, "You're really self-aware about your lack of self-awareness. That's so weird." And I was like, "Oh, thank you."
I too feel like I'm just gonna have to wait till I commit a terrible crime and then write about it as fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I get, see if I can get the big advance and then write about it so I can flee and hide. But no, I don't think so. I maybe, emotionally self-revelatory, but nothing like interesting. Sad to say.
So the advice seems to be that if you're gonna commit a crime, make sure you can get a big enough advance on your book so you can escape. So everyone put that down in your notebooks. Another one coming in from Paula. Do you ever worry about taking something you've read in another book and subconsciously putting it in yours?
I do worry about that. Yeah, I mean, I worry. I don't like lie awake at night worrying about it, but sometimes I'll read something really striking, or sometimes if I'll write something and I'll stop and I'll think like, wait a minute, did that come from somewhere else? Did that come from somebody else's book that I read or an article I read? So I worry about it, but that may just be sort of Catholic guilt.
I kind of do, but we all influence one another. I mean, I know Steph and I definitely are big Raymond Chandler fans, and I'm sure there are some similarities in some things of how we describe LA or whatever. But as I try when I'm actively writing, I don't read mystery or crime because I don't want to be influenced knowingly that, okay, I'm reading Steph's book and, oh, I need to have why is there a Korean mom in my story all of a sudden now? I want to avoid that. So I read everything else except mystery and crime when I'm actively writing a story, just to make sure that, either I don't subconsciously write something, or also I don't read it because sometimes you read something so good that it's discouraging. It's like, I can never write that sentence, so why am I even doing this? This is crap, and you end up throwing it away and feeling bad. So it's protective in a way.
Yeah.
I worry. I guess I don't worry about that so much. I'm constantly reading mystery crime. I kind of like rotated in and out. And so I just try, I don't really stress about that, because if I stressed about that, then I'd have to change my reading habits. And I'm just, I feel like I'm very particular about the way I read. But the other thing is, like, I feel like I'll catch stuff when I'm editing. And I guess I'm less worried about like absorbing kind of plot details from the world or something from like a really good news story, or even kind of like having some great dynamic that I read in a novel kind of make its way in some indirect way into my fiction. Like, that stuff doesn't worry me. In fact, I think it's mostly a positive. What I worry about is stuff like, am I kind of like starting to adopt somebody else's voice, and that stuff I feel like is easy enough to edit out, so I don't stress too much about it.
Yeah, I feel like the novel, like the process of writing a novel, it's just like this black hole that sucks every piece of experience that you're, from like what you're watching on TV to what you see at the grocery store to, just everything kind of becomes grist for the mill.
Mhm.
So, I mean, unless you're like straight up plagiarizing, I don't take it as a problem. You know, I think it's just part of the, you know, like how a novel is processed is that it's, you know, an I can't say the word.
Amalgamation.
Yeah, something like that.
Mhm. It's alchemy. It's alchemy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're gonna do one more question. Sorry if we didn't get to any of the other questions, but for the sake of time, we're doing it this way. So we've got a final question from Todd Peterson, who is also a writer who's got a book called Picnic in the Ruins that we have at Sturgis Library. It's got an amazing review. So if you like mystery thrillers, crime stuff, check that one out too. Todd asks, exposition in crime novels is so important. How do you deliver important information without too much telling?
Mm.
That's a tricky one.
So, yeah, it's a tricky one. I would say what helps me a lot is reading it aloud. And if I'm bored by all this, or if my husband, who I read to all the time, if he's bored by it, then I cut it. My day job is very helpful in this. I am a medical writer in my day job. So I need to, in reports, describe what this medicine will do or what this research is. And it's for donors who have very short attention spans. And I've learned over the years to cut out, as Elmore Leonard says, cut out the boring stuff. Just say, this pill kills the cancer and improves the life of a patient. And that's it. You back out of it. The whole going on and on about forensics and what this little gene will express this and this. No one wants to read. They just want to get to the good stuff. Just tell it. And reading aloud helps you figure out how far you should go and how much you should say. I think people just kind of want a hint of it, you know, run it under some water kind of thing, not the entire tea leaf, but just hints of it. And reading aloud helps with figuring that out.
I think sometimes you have to tell. I mean, I think like I have
Yeah.
accepted that there's a level of you have to tellness to like every story, and you want to make it so that it's not a dump and it's not boring. And I kind of try to make it so that any kind of exposition comes out in the way that it would come out if the reader weren't there, if it were a conversation between people. Because sometimes, you know, like let's say like a dead body, let's say someone is murdered in your backyard. You know, at some point you're gonna have that conversation where your husband comes home and he's like, "Oh, what the fuck happened? Oh, sorry about that." And you have to tell him like, "This is what happened." And
Yeah.
you know, I think like sometimes if you want to get like too artful about it, it gets really tortured. And I think as long as it's not purely for the audience's benefit, you can get away with like telling some stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you just have to kind of choose your spots.
Yeah, I think the exposition ultimately has to be urgent for the character.
Yeah.
And if it is, then it's not exposition. It's part of the plot. It's part of the energy of the forward movement.
Yeah, I think you can tie yourself in knots trying to, you know, show and not tell something. But writing is artifactual. We're creating an artifact, something that's supposed to resemble real life, but it's not, you know, and readers understand that. So sometimes if you just have to explain what kind of a gun it is and give all the details so the gun nuts out there are going to know that you know what you're talking about, sometimes you just got to get that information there and on the page so that people, you know, whatever it is, some nuts and bolts piece of exposition or information, an info dump, sometimes you just have to put it out there. And, you know, and some of that stuff is interesting and readers want to read it. It's basically, I think what you were saying about reading stuff aloud. You know, if I read my own work aloud, I come, like Elmer Leonard says, when I get to the part that readers skip, then I know that's the stuff to cut.
Because it's aesthetic too. I mean, think about, and I see this in my professional life when I'm trying to, you know, raise millions of dollars for medical research. No one wants to read blocks of paragraphs. No one. And if you give air to some of how it actually looks on the page, you will figure out what is the most important thing I need to share on this page to get people to read. Because I know when I see just one long paragraph of something, I'm going to just kind of pick out words to find the essence of that. So, don't make your readers skim. Keep them engaged by, again, cutting out the stuff that you don't really need, and it'll be fine.
So I think on that note, it's 8 o'clock. So we are done tonight. If this was like a real crowd, we do a bunch of clapping and stuff. But because we're on Zoom, everyone gets to silently clap. So if you would like to silently clap for our panelists and offer them your congratulations and your thanks and praise, that would be great. Again,
Kathleen. My cousin is out there from the West
My
Coast.
cousin Kathleen.
Had to wait.
Yay, the best coast.
And again, you'll see in the chat, if you want to check those book buying links, go check them out. If you're local, we have all the authors' books at the library. We have a bunch of them through Overdrive, so you can listen to them on audio. And if you have any other further questions, feel free to reach out to me. But if the writers could stick around for 2 seconds and if everyone else could log off, that would be awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for doing this.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.